A very good morning to all of you joining us on this Friends of Europe's Critical Thinking Live. The topic is culture, the role of culture, how culture and digitalisation, are they strange bedfellows? Can they work together? What kind of transformative elements has digital had on arts? Does it bring people together? Does it actually increase inequalities? Does it create new forms of monetization? How does it actually create a different kind of social glue? And is digitalization basically the death of arts and culture as we know it? Or is it a force for good? So with me, I have a range of really interesting speakers to discuss these very important, very broad topics. We have a vice president, we have a member of a cabinet, we have an art museum director, and we have someone from Google who actually is working on arts and culture from a technology platform perspective. So without further ado, I'd like to start with the member of cabinet. So Lauriane, thank you and very warm welcome to you for joining us today. You're steeped in matters of public policy, Lauriane. You support the Commissioner Mariya Gabriel, who's been very at the centre of discussions around culture and arts, and she's made sure that as part of the recovery funding that there's an element of culture and arts in there, and it's really, and also the point that many artists have gone to the wall because of the COVID situation, and we've seen many people suffer quite extensively, but it seems to be something which we perhaps don't value or we don't appreciate until it's gone. So Lauriane, over for you. What I'd like to know is, how has digitalization expanded the reach of Europe's rich cultural heritage? Over to you.
Thank you, Dharmendra. Indeed, digitalization is both an opportunity and a challenge to the cultural and creative sectors as a whole, and naturally when it comes to our cultural heritage and expanding its reach. I can tell you that it's at the heart of our action at EU level. For example, it was one of the main axes of the Council work plan for culture. Also with the pandemic, naturally the offer for online experiences, cultural experiences, has developed. Just to give you an example, it's 93 of the museum have reacted to COVID by introducing and developing new tours, virtual exhibition for their visitors. Of course, it was also part of the national recovery and resilience plans of the member states that we support through the dedicated EU instruments. At the Commission, we pay specific attention, naturally, to the cost that comes with it, to the skills that have to be gained by the sector to harness this transition. Of course, we also pay attention to the predominance of some players, naturally thinking of the mainstream providers, just to make sure that the unique richness of our cultural diversity is well represented. I can just give you a few examples on how to expand the reach, because here, naturally, we think of digitalization, of collections, and this is done brilliantly by Europeana. But at the same time, we also have targeted actions. Very often, we think of young people, but we also have action, for example, for elderly people, and you see health institution working together with cultural institution. This is very relevant example, because it is extremely important for Commissioner that this digitalization of cultural experiences is accessible to all citizens, and not only to an elite part of museum goers, for example. Naturally, our actions can be B2B, B2C. I have given you a few examples with Europeana, with the projects also to elderly people. But naturally, we are also thinking on how we can get professionals working together and just reaping the benefits of this of digitalization to expand then in a second phase the reach. On this, we also have a very ambitious project of a cloud to safeguard cultural heritage. We have European museum working together. We support it via our cluster 2 of Horizon Europe, the research program of the EU. And indeed, with this, we do not only serve ultimately the reach, but also making sure that our strategic assets are also protected by European players. We see it as a synergy. We are working with global players and also making sure that European actors are there.
Thank you, Lauriane. That was very interesting in terms of hearing about the policy and the approach that that you're taking. One of the questions that I think people that were watching this will be interested in, I don't want you to come back to this at the moment, we'll come back in the Q&A or the discussion with everybody, is about you preserve types of culture or you provide access to certain communities. Making it accessible is not good enough, is it really? Because at the end of the day, poor sections of communities all across Europe and the globe can't simply just have the door open. You need to be able to enable them to walk into that door and feel that that culture is also theirs and that actually they can connect to it. And I just think that sometimes we lose sight of the socio-economic inequalities in access to arts and culture, but also the production of arts and culture from those communities. But something for us to think about. Thank you very much, though, because I know there's a lot you're doing, and in this period of time we can't really capture everything. So I'm going to turn now to Beatrice. Beatrice, welcome. Thank you for joining us. One of our European young leaders. You're a cultural strategist. You're a museum director, and you're doing all things arts. You've been all over the world. From your perspective, can you add your thinking, and actually given the experience of being a curator, running a museum and being a strategist, that point of, is digital doing the right thing? Is in terms of the combination of what we know around AI, augmented reality, etc. and so forth, is it creating new experiences, and can we still call it art?
It's a big question. There are different, like replies to that according to whom you ask. If it's the artist, it's the cultural manager, or else. But I think that we have to, set the record straight on what it is exactly a digital transition for an institution. In a sense that this is a world that gained currency, of course, during the pandemic, and this created, like an avalanche of responses, of course, from institutions that wanted to remain connected, with their communities and etc. This also created brought all sorts of institutions, small and large, to compete into a really highly saturated environment, which is the online environment. And so while in the beginning, this might have been an easy transition in terms of simply using, existing tools, that on social platforms, and etc. True kind of digital turn for institution is a costly endeavor. And we have to consider there are two key aspects to this. There is a back end, which is how can advanced technology, augmented reality, virtual reality, and all of this benefit, for example, the operational side of institutions. So how it can serve an integrated set of services that are on the front desk, basically. So how do you manage, say, archives, collections, ticketing, so everything that is really needed for an institution to step into a new era. And this is key for businesses, cultural businesses like museums are, to stay alive, to make essentially their models, more efficient. The other aspect instead is the front end of this. So how do technologies really benefit at large, a kind of critical experimental discourse within the field of art in the most expanded sense. And so how can technologies in that sense, benefit how we can, meaningfully contribute through institutional work to what the digital is nowadays. Because of course, the moment you speak of augmented reality, artificial intelligence, deep learning, these are highly, they open up really avenues of critical inquiry and also of political contestation. So there's a lot that comes to this. And one key problem I would say for institutions at large is that they require also physical hardware. They require bandwidth. They require also, equipment that they need, to possess if they want to also engage with this type of creation. But so there are two sides of this that are equally important in a way that they do serve different purposes into satisfying also different publics. So one important thing that I probably will leave here, and then for the conversation is culture, especially institutions, of art in general, for dedicated to contemporary creativity, must perform, in front of now, very highly differentiated publics. So it's public to the plural, and the digital technologies can definitely, support, this form of, differentiation, that again translates into economic, factors for the sustainability, and survival of institutions. So technology serves general publics, it serves operational aspects, it serves creation, and it needs to serve also the possibility for creating different forms of storytelling and narratives into which different publics can, enter. So there's different front lines, let's say, into which, digital, advanced technology can really help, like the preservation, the sustainment, and like the experimentation, within creativity.
So Beatrice, are you on the side of the fact that actually let digital and digitalization and the pace of its possibilities flow freely, unfettered, and let it just actually have a laissez-faire approach to its impact on arts, culture, access, and what you call that differentiated market? Are you saying let it just happen, or are you also, perhaps, and this is my question, asking for some sort of regulatory framework around this? Is that just a silly question to ask? I just wanted to ask you that. What's your reaction to that? But also, Lauriane, your view would be really appreciated too. What's your view, Beatrice?
No, I think that it's a key question to make sure that sort of the digital turn is really a sort of equitable process, because if it doesn't, it will leave corpses behind, metaphorically speaking, in this case. Sorry, no pun intended. But in a sense that, yes, I mean, one voice I can bring from the ground of those that do my job is that there is also a huge disconnect between, the skill set within the digital technological field and museums in the small and medium scale that will need essentially, this type of, upskilling, digital upskilling. So there has to be, yes, I believe, a way in which this becomes a kind of, basis, base sort of like an item, within what an institution of culture nowadays needs to be, provided with. Or definitely, this will impact eventually their performance, and therefore they're also, their survival. And I speak also from a country like Italy, where there's a plethora of institutions that actually really are on the medium and small scale, and these are those institutions that really suffer the most, like in this contexts.
And the challenging question again, but I'm going to move to Lauriane. Are museums and cultural institutions a thing of the past in the next 5 years, given digitalization? When you think about the footfall of people that walk in, are they better served as social housing rather than galleries that are empty and big buildings that actually no one's going into other than a certain section and class of community? And digitalization, given the fact that you can do all your access with your art collection from your couch or your kitchen table, are these physical institutions, going to last?
Well, first of all, I don't like to oppose the digital world with the museum world, because here I see the synergy. I can see that we can all work in an ecosystem mode, and definitely there are different traditions in the way of doing things, but precisely to ensure a bright future, not only of this institution, but of our cultural heritage and great reach. I trust that they have a role to play. To go back to what you've said also, Dharmendra, naturally, our reply in the European institution is on two legs. First, calibrated regulation. This is what was done in the previous mandate already with the revision of the copyrights, with also a revision of the framework for audiovisual. And now with the DSA, which also has implications for the stakeholders from the cultural and creative industries. Simply, I'd like to say again, it's political since we feel it is. So first of all, we have to assign ourselves the goal to make it inclusive. Then the instrument come second, and definitely we are introducing it in all our action. Is also for business development, linking the dots, like you have said. This is what we do with our with the EIT and the Innovation Council, with a dedicated TIC community, knowledge and innovation community. We also have it introduced in our research program. So very valid point for Beatrice, and we're working on it.
Sure, but we're, and this is a thing for all of us to think about. We've come through almost 3 years of the most significant impact on our lives in terms of the health crisis and now the financial crisis and now a security crisis. We're battered almost, and we know that the game's not over yet in terms of health and finance and security. We know prices are going through the roof. And I suppose one of the questions I have for all of you, and some perhaps, Beatrice can answer this question, is, people are making choices between fuel and food at the moment, right? We've spent years in our homes during lockdown consuming every aspect of life, arts, culture, everything, through a screen. What really do you see as the future? How can we make sense of this future? Or are we simply thinking that we're back to normal and we just readjust ourselves and continue as we ever were? My sense is that we haven't really learned or understood the harsh economic impact on arts and culture that we might be witnessing in the next couple of years because of where we are. Beatrice, any views?
Well, definitely, I agree with you. This has, the early phase of the pandemic has literally decimated like the population, like when it comes, like to institutions. But I think that the key question here is not really, is this, the physical experience, like, or the choice over, getting the physical experience or not, an alternative. That's not that doesn't enter really the equation of the future. I think that people in any case have always sought for a physical engagement, like as a, complementary to something else. We are simply coming into an horizon of things where so much is possible. So it's not really a question of, I believe, the cost of culture on an individual level. I think that this is, in my experience also, I don't think that people are necessarily taking that out of the equation, but I think that it has to be a better integration of, forms of alliance and collaboration and etc. from, let's say, the realm of culture intended in this case as, creativity in the arts, with art adjacent fields, like it could be cinema, it could be gaming. So that is the frontier, is finding ways through which, culture at that level, can really sort of like start transiting in a way, more fluidly at their own publics across. So this, I think, would be the interesting next frontier to look into. Otherwise, of course, the alternative is that, they will all, the sector will cannibalize itself, right? Because we'll enter into a competition that is untenable, so it's about integrating experiences, differentiating them, finding new alliances, within the sector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Let's move to, and I think it's interesting what you're saying, because my sense is, and the question I have is that, if the cultural sector doesn't actually rethink itself and think about its reach and its access and, what it communicates in terms of identity, national or European identities, you're going to, my sense is just when you look around the urban centers of Europe, young people are entering a kind of a punk art type of movement, which is reshaping things, which actually I feel that the mainstream sector is just not catching up with. But let's come to that in a moment. I want to go to Google Arts and culture. I'm really pleased to have Pierre. Pierre, thank you for joining us. Google, obviously, massive engine globally. You do things on arts and culture, so I'm really pleased that we have you here to be able to explain to our audience, which is far and wide, about the kind of things that you're doing. Give us an example of kind of things you do to preserve heritage. And then I'll come back to you with another question, but it'll be, I think, what I know, I think our audience will find quite interesting to learn from you. Welcome, and over to you, Pierre.
Thank you so much. Actually, I've been hearing already very relevant and crucial comments on audiences and the fact that the matter of access to culture and arts is not only an elite thing. And I think this is something I'd like to elaborate a little on. But you might know that we are an innovation partner for museum organization and cultural organizations for over 10 years, with one mission, which is to provide access to arts and culture to everyone online. This is really what we do here, based in Paris, with our engineering group. For the past 10 years, we've been working with different groups, right? So Centre Pompidou in Paris, or Forbidden City in China, or many others, right? The one example I was thinking to illustrate your question with was actually in Africa, in Mali. It's a very recent initiative, which I think might help everyone understand how technologies are actually a way for us to preserve endangered culture online. You can think of many different threats around cultural heritage, right? You have climate change, for instance, threatening heritage sites such as the Easter Islands or the Cathedral of Edinburgh, threatened by acid rains or such threat, right? Another threat that seems very actual right now is, of course, conflicts and wars. Not, of course, to mention what's going on in Ukraine at the moment. One project that I think shed a light on how technology can play a role into this is actually the initiative we launched in Mali, actually a few weeks ago. As you may know, there is a war that started in Mali in 2012, which endangered the manuscript of Timbuktu, which is a very, very precious series of artifacts. For those who are not very familiar, like I wasn't before taking care of this project, the manuscript of Timbuktu, as you may know, is a series of 400,000 manuscripts. It's a very valuable artifact that tell us about the history of Africa, because many thought that the history of Africa was shared by oral tradition, right? But we also have some written elements through which the culture has been shared. Those manuscripts right now are very at risk for the reason I mentioned earlier, which is the war threat and the threat from jihadists. And we've been in touch with curators and experts which help us connect to actually digitize those manuscripts. This is a way by which technology can help preserve endangered culture. But for me, this is just one step of the way, because when you bring access and you bring it online for everyone, you just met half the way, right? The other half is probably even more important, which is about giving the voice to experts, curators, historians, because they are the one who will be sharing the stories. Because it's not so much about bringing beautiful images online, it's about sharing exciting stories so every audience can feel connected. And to me, this is probably the main responsibility of technologies among the cultural sector, is to be relevant, is to also help cultural organization connect with new audiences. If I may, I'd like to pick another example that I have in mind. It's a feature of Google Arts and Culture, which I really love. When you think about it, it's really hard. For instance, when I take my niece to a museum to get her overexcited about portraits in museum, right? It's not that easy, right? It's our mission, I mean, for all of us, but not always easy. Something which is easy is to get them excited about selfies. So sometimes there is a connection between the two. And we've been thinking about how could we use technologies, and in this example, AI, to actually, through a selfie, make it match with the portrait from a museum across the world. It's not that complicated in technological sense. But this is where I think AI and technologies at large can play a role in preserving culture, but also in bringing access to new type of audiences and making sure, of course, that we don't keep cultural artifacts to a social elite, but make sure that it's brought as many as possible.
I'm so glad you made that point, because it's something we'll come back to, because I want to move to Eva now. But that point about that, education budgets have been slashed across the world, especially in Europe, and what we understood to have, arts and culture within schooling has disappeared almost. And what we all know from our experiences, I'm much older than all of you, but those of you who've gone to school in the past 25 years will know that actually there was a greater importance in using arts and culture as a device for creativity, broadening your horizons, engaging over generations, and intellectual curiosity. But that seems to have gone. And, is that going to go forever? But I like your idea of how to use technology in the way that you've just described to engage people in that conversation, but also to relate to art. But I'll come back to that in a moment, because I'm running out of time. But I want to go to Eva. Eva, thank you for joining us. You are one of our European young leaders, Vice President of the Parliament, and you've been doing and driving on all matters tech, from the digital single market. You're kind of involved in drafting legislation to do with AI, blockchain, everything that's kind of tech matters. You're there. So in the context of this conversation and what you've been hearing, share with us your perspective, that you sit there as Vice President, okay? You are also, they're the voice of the people of Europe as well. Right? How do you make the connection? What do you think the future connection will be between the production of art, but most importantly, the consumption of art, and actually its equalities implications? Really tough question, I know, Eva, but have a go.
So it's not just a tough question. It's quite complex, because we talk about basically new technologies and the future of art and culture and how they will develop together. So let me start by saying that basically one of the things that we know that AI cannot replace is the creativity, human creativity. Not because it cannot replicate, it cannot copy art pieces or even compose songs, but because the logic of culture and creativity is exactly the basis of human activity. It needs to be made by humans for humans. So it doesn't make sense to design something that won't be done in a human-centric manner. So since creativity is something that can be complemented and supported, but by tools and technology, we can use it in several manners. You mentioned about AI in terms of preservation of our heritage, or you can use AI in order to make it more accessible, the art and our history, cultural history, to everybody. This is actually a big challenge, because we have not done enough. So there is a possibility to listen and to hear and to have more people engaging in order to achieve and digitalize a bigger percentage of our cultural heritage. There are some initiatives, so I can speak with examples. So we have an initiative where they are trying to concentrate, to be able to browse online European cultural heritage of artifacts and artworks, around 58 million at this point pieces, in an easy manner. Then there is another one that I think is called Time Machine, that it tries to digitalize 2000 years of the European history to make it available to a larger audience. Not easy, because it's, again, how can you do that for 2000 years of European history? Then we also talk about different ways of the use of AI. There is another project, Motion Bank, where actually intangible cultural practices like dance through history could be saved with videos again, and keep any material available in order for someone to be able to browse and understand how it evolved. And of course, to archive such video footage takes a lot of time, and it needs support also from the European institutions. It needs severe funding from us, heavy funding. Of course, then we can have more simple applications where you can enter a museum and you can have a robot or a chatbot to inform you about what you are watching and to have a more personal experience of what you see in the location that you are at. So we can start by saying we need definitely to understand that digitalization has accelerated through the pandemic, that we need to acquire digital skills, because even just not to create, but to understand, browse, and have access, we need to have these skills. And in order to move ahead and understand also the challenges of the future of jobs around AI and culture, we need also to imagine how things can be transformed. You can have people that they now design online 3D pieces of art, and then they can actually sell them on the metaverse or on a digital gallery for some others to watch. And you can connect it. The challenge of IP rights is also something we're going to be addressing soon, also from the European Parliament, to ensure that your art is accessible to everyone. A final thing, there is a program that has started several years ago. It's called STARTS. It's run from the European Commission. I have also supported with funding through pilot projects from the European Parliament side, where it brings together science, technology, and art to see how we can develop new experiences, new ideas, new materials, new jobs, basically, and to allow people to understand what they can use to create new forms of art. I think similar projects to be supported by us can give us a great potential and can respond to all these challenges that we can face. And you mentioned, and it was very, very interesting, the identity issue. People will have their offline identity and an online identity, and they can be completely separate. You can have an avatar where it's like it has a different job, it is a different physical appearance, a design online, and your activities could be completely different. And you can have a job online as a stylist, for example, or to be a fashion designer with clothes that they will never be materialized in a physical manner. And then offline, you can have like a different job, a different identity to be a different person. So we have to take steps. And I think that even hosting such an event and discussion, it shows that there is an understanding now in a more mature level of the challenges and what we can achieve together. And thank you for having me joining this exciting, I think, brainstorm.
It's a joy. It's been such a long time since we haven't had this opportunity to chat with you. You're one of Friends of Europe Debate, so I'm really pleased that you have had the time to join us. But I'm going to come back to you in a moment, because one of the things I want to ask you, so that I forewarn you, I want you to share with us, if you can, what do you see as the future policy agenda for you in the context of the things you've just said? How, in terms of all that you're doing on the kind of, if I call it the technology front, everything, the single market, regulation, you're seeing the pace of technological change. What do you see? What do you think you'll have to do as a policymaker, as a voice of citizens across Europe, to ensure that the issue of identity, i.e. European identity, is seen as being multiple, diverse, and tackling inequalities, but also that it actually closes the inequalities but improves social mobility? So that's a big question. You can tackle one of those, but I want to come back to you on that. But I'm going to go back first to Beatrice. So my last 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you a big question each. Beatrice, cultural practitioner, you've run museums, you've been all over the world. You can see what's happening right in front of your eyes in terms of the change, the nature of change, in terms of consumption, production, and habits that are forming, and new generations. So one of the things that's really quite striking that we don't talk about is that in the past 20 years, or since the tablet or the smartphone, we've got a generation of babies that are using tablets before they're 2. Right? And they're using phones before they're 2. So you're creating a generation of people that are more used to doing stuff like this and doing stuff on here rather than communicating with each other. So Beatrice, from your point, what would you like to see happen if you had the opportunity, let's say, to speak to, well, obviously we've got Eva here as a fellow European young leader, but those who are making decisions on big budgets in Europe, right, around arts and culture, what would you like to see happen, Beatrice?
Well, thank you for delivering that to me as a question. You're no pressure. Like, you have here Google,
I'll go to Google. Don't worry. I'm not going to let them off the hook either.
No, but I mean, I think that we all preoccupy a little bit too much about how generations are actually going to fathom, like this sort of virtual, physical, digital or known. I mean, we are not digital natives. I don't think the people in this conversation are, meaning so that we haven't experienced that transition, right? And I think that there is one incredible aspect to this, which is technology it's a crucible through which we mediate, essentially our relationship with reality, whatever sorts, like of reality, but one, about identity, about, like belonging, and technology through all of its dimension does support the possibility of creating stories, creating storytelling about this experience of a world that is, dramatically expanding. Our cognitive understanding of the world is it goes beyond the planetary, if you understand what I mean. And this is what creativity is all about now. It's about really, sort of artists, designers, architects, whatever field they come from, to really venture into a different way of feeling, of sensing what is this sort of like extraterrestrial, meaning literally beyond the physical confines of the world. What does it mean to feel, to be human? It really, technology helps touching about, upon topics that really arrive at to the philosophy of mind. And this, I think, it's an incredible educational, pedagogical, if you want, environment to explore. So if anything, I would say this merging of knowledge, so really bringing the scientific world through all of the, its ramifications, through climate science, neuroscience, biology, philosophy of mind, come together with the creative world through which institutions of culture can really become a platform for, dissemination, debate, discussion, and encounter, because there's nothing that really serves this purpose right now. Everything is really still siloed, within either the academic and scientific or research field, and there is really a gap there. So if anything, I would put financial input in allowing these worlds to collide and find in museums and institutions a platform through which debate, encounter, and creativity can really kind of happen.
See, you did it brilliantly. What a beautiful vision, Beatrice. Thank you. Let's hope people listen. But thank you for sharing that with us and that challenging question. Before I move to Lauriane, I'm going to come back to you, Pierre, and ask that question that you're a household name, you're a major platform across the world, and you're doing arts and culture. You're, the way you described the Mali, and so you're playing that kind of role of social responsibility almost, about contributing to the world being a better place. What is it what's next on the horizon for Google Arts and Culture in terms of that question I posed about the relationship with education, and especially those who are furthest from the kind of opportunity that all of us take for granted, and those who won't see arts and culture as for them because no one's opened that door in their mind or taken time to say it's also for you and it can also help you redefine yourself. Over to you.
It's an excellent question. I guess what is next for us is still in the making. So we work in this place here in Paris called The Lab, which is our research and development space, right? Where we host artists in residency, creative coders, technologists, museum directors, creators, gallerists, like the whole cultural ecosystem. And I think what's next will mostly depend on the challenge and the challenges that the cultural ecosystem is facing and for which technologies might have some answer. Maybe just to illustrate that, I was talking about the Centre Pompidou a few minutes ago, and they came to us some time ago with an excellent challenge, which is they were talking about Kandinsky and how he was facing this neural condition called synesthesia, which made him actually hear colors. And they were asking us, is there a way for us to explain to everyone online what is synesthesia? So we could actually hear his masterwork, Yellow, Red, Blue. Well, that is a challenge. That is what's next. Is bringing new pathways into art, into creation, using, for instance, technology such as AI. So it's an open place. There will be many different type of creation. So let's see what comes. But I'm confident that the technologies can play a role in that regard, if we manage also to keep, let's say, all actors in the playfield informed and as skilled as possible. I think this is a point that was raised by Mrs. Kaili a few minutes ago. I think training programs on the emerging technologies are key to make everyone as responsible as can be on what's coming up.
Yeah, thank you. And we look forward to engaging you again, because it'd be great to see how your lab, what you're doing, is able to almost like skew itself to the half of this world, or half of Europe, that actually doesn't see themselves represented in art and do not see themselves as curators, actors in what was regarded as popular arts and culture. And actually they're going to different ways, whether it's, for many teenagers, TikTok is their cultural platform and their arts platform. And have we really understood what that means into the future? But that conversation we'll have some other time, because as you can see, I'm kind of quite interested in all of this, but time is of the essence. But thank you for being with us. But we will come back to you, hopefully in the near future, to, I suppose, recompose this discussion, because it's, I think, in the context of the war where we are at the moment, and what we do know is the decimation of arts and culture in Ukraine. Some artifacts have just gone forever. We'll never see them again. And there's something about how do we treasure in advance and, I suppose, create those memories for future generations who won't actually remember anything. I'm going to go to Lauriane. Lauriane, I'm going to, for me, obviously, the commissioner you support has been very articulate, very forceful about these issues of arts and culture. What's next on the policy agendas for our audience? Tell us where you're going now, because there's two halves to this debate. There's all the stuff that's happening on digital, regulation, legislation, and the structure of it, and then you've got arts and culture. What do you see as being, you've been making sure that the recovery funding addresses some of this, but where do you see what's the next on the horizon for you?
Yes, thank you. So generally speaking, we are at a certain point of this mandate when, we have the instrument, we have the money. It's the bigger budget ever for culture. And as you know, we are also now working on the connection, making sense to the whole portfolio, making sure that we connect the dots with the cultural community, research and innovation community, and naturally the citizens, because this is very, very important for Commissioner, making sure that it benefits to all citizens. So I'd say naturally we are working in direction of making it truly inclusive, because as you say, creating the tools is not enough. Our action goes with regulation, targeted action, and support to the professionals. And of course, remaining flexible. And I can tell you that for Ukraine, for example, Commissioner is highly mobilized, and we are contributing now with materials, for example, for Ukraine to help protect what is left of the cultural heritage. Commissioner herself is in contact with the ministers over there. I mean, it's an immense challenge, and we'll make sure that we reap the benefits of digitalization to move forward on this.
Lauriane, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Last but not least, Eva, to you to close this conversation, which I think is quite appropriate given the role you've played in all matters digital, on regulation and access, but also making sure that you're taking responsibility of that twin aim of being able to support innovation and technological advancement, whilst also protecting the rights of users, citizens, and consumers. But in there lies the rub about what the future holds for you on this agenda of arts and culture. I know it's a hard question, but what do you see? We're at the point where this particular term which has been riddled with so many crises. I do feel sorry for the commissioners. You had the COVID, you've had the financial, now a war, and actually they come to conclusion in 23-24. What do you see as the policy agenda for you that's going to be really important? If you can share that with us, Eva.
Yes, well, yeah, that's a complicated question again, but very interesting indeed. So, as it was said, we have one of the biggest budgets for Creative Europe. So it's 400 almost million for 22 in total until 27. It's 2.5 billion euros to be invested in projects for cultural and creative industries, also media to co-create, let's say, virtual reality for education, or to preserve some, again, ideas and environments that we can recreate online. This is, I think it's so, since it has indeed increased, that we want to move ahead with digitalization and to respond to all of these challenges. I talked about the IP rights, so this is something that we have to see again in terms of like content, what's allowed to be online, to be accessible, and to ensure that there will be free content for everybody. So we are discussing about how we can have a platform where we can have documentaries or like anything that can be easily available to citizens to be also translated in all the languages of Europe. So there are projects like that already on the table, being funded or ready to be funded by Europe. Then we talked about reducing inequalities. This is a big fight we have to give, like to reduce inequalities. We don't think that AI immediately will achieve that. It can be a very strong tool, but the tendency is to increase inequalities actually. So I believe if we manage to use it properly, we can make it more accessible. For example, you remember during the lockdown in the beginning, there were artists at home,
yes,
but they could have a concert together,
Yes.
and it could be seen by everybody under lockdown. So it brought us like closer together than the physical distance. It didn't actually matter.
Yes.
So I think this is a very positive example of what to expect. I have called for NFTs legislation, connecting also to the IP rights of the content, which means for non-fungible tokens or art to be able to have legal certainty. And this means to ensure that all the artists will have the control of their data and their projects online. So once we have these things coming to us in our hands, like to do the legislation, I think it will also release new opportunities and dynamics for Europe. But again, there are many projects, there is the funding. We just need to have also new ideas on how we can achieve the best that the technology and culture and creativity is giving to us.
Eva, thank you. I'm glad you were able to remind us of that lovely memory that I think we've forgotten so quickly, about the beauty of connectivity despite being locked down. That, you know, people were able to cross their streets, see their neighbours for the first time, but have music on the street that was empty, you know, and that moment, that sense of connectivity, we've lost sight of so quickly. So thank you for reminding us of what we can do in moments of adversity. And it's a shame that it's only in moments of adversity we actually reconnect and remember our humanity, if you like. But thank you all very much, and I'm sorry for, you know, I hope you didn't mind me making you a honorary EY European Young Leader for Friends of Europe, but that's really good to have you engage with us. Thank you all. I think this conversation, and you know this is not going away, and I think we're committed to making sure, as we've done with a lot of our work on arts and culture, we're going to continue the momentum. One of the things that, you know, we are going to present a manifesto of action for Mariya, Gabriel and others. We want to make sure that we use cultural practitioners from all different backgrounds to maintain the kind of tempo on the debate. Some of the things that you were saying, Eva, and others here, and that the cultural and the critical importance is, how do you make sure the ecology of public, private, voluntary community is always constantly connected around this debate? Thank you all for joining us. We look forward to welcoming you again. And to our audience, be safe, keep your distance, and hopefully you enjoyed this. It was stimulating and provocative. And keep an eye on our website for our next offering. Thank you, take care, bye-bye all of you.